Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hey, Oliver, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for joining us today. I think we're going. So you've had a lot of changes in your life this last couple of years.
Yeah, we're growing as a person, and we're thrilled about it.
Growing as a person and as a family, right?
Correct. Yeah. My wife is expecting soon, and we're saying our prayers for a healthy, happy baby, and could be any time. So we're keeping an eye on the phone in case I got to jet out of here.
No. Oh, really?
Well,
Are you that close?
Yeah, the official due date is on the 27th of Thanksgiving.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
That's awesome. Are you excited?
Yeah, we're very blessed. I'd say we're just about ready. We're getting closer to being ready. We've had a lot of generous outpouring of love and support, and that feels amazing. So to have people to share life's joys with is a tremendous blessing that we're very thankful for.
Yeah. Yeah. So Raina was your clerk last year, right?
Correct.
So what are you going to do this year?
Oh, she'll still be my clerk. It's not,
Really?
Yeah, it's not that challenging of a job.
Is she going to have the baby in a backpack or?
No, we have a work from home situation. Thankfully, I am now officially a committee chairman, but I don't. My clerk just needs to call the official roll at a few meetings, and we get that covered with some of our other friends at the Capitol. So she's happy to respond from things remotely, and pocket that extra couple hourly pay stubs for our family.
Right, that's fantastic. Yeah, she's amazing. I forget, how did you guys meet?
We first met at our church at St. Mary Parish through the choir. So we sang hymns together.
All right. Well, I've always wanted to talk to you about your background a little bit, and I know you did some stand-up. Can you kind of fill me in on that and just...
I was an amateur stand-up for a couple of years. I was in kind of a dead-end sales gig that I didn't really enjoy, and so I just needed something, a change of pace in my life to, throw things up. And so I started attending the local open mic, and it was fun for me in terms of just being able to, measure the crowd and make people uncomfortable, and learned a lot about timing and how audiences react to things. And, it's a small town. It's a pretty nice grassroots feel coffee shop, and I was able to become a regular performer and hosted from time to time, and was just kind of about a fixture there for a couple of year period until we made the decision to run for office.
I mean, were you funny growing up? Did your family say you should do stand-up?
I always enjoyed making people laugh. And I was a little bit of a class clown, almost to a detriment to a flaw, where I would do things, for the laugh, or kind of make a fool out of myself just for no good reason, maybe, demean myself in a way that probably wasn't healthy. But yeah, we loved getting the laugh, and we loved performing. And so it's a great hobby. It's a great expression. And I do really enjoy comedy and a lot of the famous comedians, and it's a hobby to kind of study the art. And so I don't know if you have any favorite comedians or what you think is funny, but
I love watching stand up. I really enjoy like Adam Sandler, and there was a guy that my wife and I watched that he didn't swear once on stage. And
Brian Regan probably?
Maybe, but he was killing us, and he played the guitar a little bit. He did a song called Yoga Pants.
Maybe. Well, so it is an art form, and Adam Sandler is one of the greatest ones. Norm Macdonald's another comedic influence that I'm really inspired by. It's great. I think laughter is healthy, and I think laughter brings people together. Laughter can sometimes be a release of tension or pressure. It's an honest, if we can laugh about things from a point of honesty, that can be very healing as well. And everyone laughs in the same language, so hopefully it can bring people together. So
Tim Hawkins.
Okay.
Yeah, have you ever heard him?
I'm not immediately familiar with him, but I think that is one of the pitfalls of amateur comedians. Is a lot of them they stink, and they kind of rely on filthy material or go blue, and
right.
And so being able to be clean is I think that's an extra talent to have.
I mean, I could list comedians all day that I love to listen to. And I've often thought, man, it'd be fun to write a stand-up bit or write a set and try that just for fun.
Well, the comedy ecosystem has kind of been exploding lately, certainly with Joe Rogan's move down in Austin, Texas, and then comedians have become more politically relevant. So the Tim Dillon show is one that I tune into quite a bit, and I get a kick out of him. And obviously, Theo Von had interviewed characters like the vice president.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's relevant, and laughter is important. And if you want to do something, I think you should express yourself and get on stage and give it a whirl. I think there is, something to the humanity about expressing, the arts and the drama and performance. And, like I said, choir or music or hymns or strumming a guitar. It's all very beautiful.
I strum the guitar a little bit. You probably saw some around the house. I always enjoyed that. How did you go from stand-up comedy, doing what you were doing, to running for the Iowa House?
Well, so some of it was a little bit related. A lot of my jokes were, somewhat political. I would touch on themes and test things and kind of, that was the shtick. I would kind of, say things and it was, does he really mean what he say? Or it'd be provocative and you kind of have some ambiguity. But I would approach political topics. And I think, honestly, there was a day where I would, write and prepare and do for the weekly open mic. And in my mind, I kept wanting to write like a pro-life answer. And I kept brainstorming like political responses I could give that could maybe weave both sides together or explore common ground. So through my creative process, my mind kept naturally gravitating to the political direction. And, made a few more political posts on Facebook. And, this was 2018. So right before, the midterms in the first Trump administration. And that was when, some of the transgender things were first starting to come out of the woodwork and Jordan Peterson was becoming popular. So it actually was kind of a natural transition. And I remember that's one of the only comedy videos that the Democrats have found is they did find the hidden video on my YouTube of a stand-up set I gave announcing my candidacy at the open mic. And they did not get the jokes at all, which is very unfortunate. But
I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah.
You sent that to me because they pulled it up and they were trying to cancel you somehow with it.
No, I don't think they were trying to. I mean, they're just idiots shouting into the void, and social media is so much of it is just so irrelevant. But again, I'm flattered that they pay the attention and I'm flattered they gave it the views or whatever. But and nothing in that set was really too offensive or vulgar. So nothing I was super ashamed of. But I'm glad you got a kick about.
Oh, I had some good laughs over it. What year was it you were elected?
2018.
Oh, was it 2018?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I think we met, it must have been 2020.
2021 is when I first, you got on my radar coming to the Capitol at the end tail of the COVID. The issues that came up in 2021, particularly it was the vaccine passport fight and then taking the mask off the kids in schools. That's when I first remember working with you. We might have crossed paths before then.
Yeah. It was all about the mandates, standing up against the mandates, and then that rolled into...
Well, so the vaccine mandates didn't actually come down until June. So
it was the masking then.
Yeah, they were still making kids wear masks in schools. So it was really interesting. Like for me, a lot of us were ready to be done with COVID in, spring of 2020. And then somehow schools were still shut down that fall. And then even into the winter of 2021, they were still shut down. And so we had to pass legislation to say that every kid has a right to in-person learning at a brick and mortar institution. And then shortly thereafter, in April, the vaccine passport scheme came out in New York City. And so this was, the idea that you would have to prove your vaccine status in order to access basic accommodations, or I think it was Bill de Blasio said the keys to New York City. Your vaccine passport is your key to New York City, and if you don't have the key, you can't get in. So the vaccine passport regime kind of came out, and the governor gave a really great press conference about how that wasn't going to fly in Iowa. And then the legislature came out with a bill that kind of fell short of what the governor had indicated to the public, and the bill we passed did allow for vaccine passports in healthcare settings, which then transitioned into the vaccine mandates from hospital networks in June of 2021 that also extended to their contractors and their volunteers and
well, it
all
also
that jazz.
Allowed employers to mandate the shot to their employees. The vaccine passport ban bill is what you're talking about.
Well, theoretically, businesses are allowed to mandate. I mean, the legal rub is, what are the acceptable exemptions to a vaccine mandate, whether it's coming from, your private business or a hospital network or whatever other setting, education. So that was kind of the timeline of that. And so, we were in the Capitol raising a ruckus in April. Thankfully, we had the big celebration with the governor taking the masks off the kids in schools, albeit a little bit late in the school year.
That was our first rally, was the rally, the day that they removed the masks And that evening, I think it was like midnight, wasn't it, when she signed the legislation?
It was after midnight, and I believe that things are connected. I believe that when a lot of people come to the Capitol Rotunda and make a loud noise in a respectful, passionate, but directed energy way, making a very clear expectation of what they want the legislature to do, that's how the political system works, and we got a victory. So I think the two is connected.
And I think you spoke at that rally.
Yeah. And I was surprised at how many people showed up because it was a very short notice ordeal. And I think you and some other
Sonia
helpers.
Swan and I really worked hard on it together.
Yeah, and it was like a 48-hour notice type thing.
Yeah.
And so that was really special to be a part of that, and that's what we needed. We needed Iowans to demand, like, hey, this is what we're not going to accept. This is what we expect, and we won't settle for anything less. And we might get a little bit loud. We'll never be overtly disrespectful or lose our cool like some of these maniacs we're seeing on the other side. But and
that's the big difference. I mean, we had chairs. We spoke. We sung hymns. We had it was respectful. I think that's a big difference.
Well, the manner in which you conduct yourself really matters. So if you're saying, hey, I want to remain employable, I want my right to employment, I want my right to public accommodation, you have to really conduct yourself very civilly.
Yeah.
If you want people to employ you and accommodate you, you need to make it easier for them. So I think that's a big difference from on some of the other civil rights issues that we saw more recently at the Capitol. Again, if you're saying, hey, the law, I want the law to require you to bend over backwards in accommodating me, and I'm going to be the most disrespectful, person jamming it down your throat or whatever with the force of government.
Face,
entitled, ungrateful, obscene. It's really, so the manner in which people conduct themselves is extremely important, especially in these civil rights type issues, and ultimately you're trying to influence people to protect your human dignity. And I think there's a theory too that if I fail to convince someone of the worthiness of my action, whether it's a vaccine exemption or wearing a mask or whatever else it is, that's a defect in me. That I need to do something different in myself to be more persuasive or make it more illustrative of. And
I've worked with a lot of activists, and I've tried to teach, our members even, that it's really through intelligent and respectful dialogue that we create positive change. And I've had Representative Holt on the podcast many times, and we were on opposite sides of the vaccine passport ban bill because of the exemptions. But he said, you were so respectful in your disagreement that I just wanted to talk to you, and I wanted to learn more about your opinion and understand it. And then years later, we're friends, and he's on the podcast multiple times.
And that's why, like, you can't burn bridges necessarily, because you're going to want to cross those bridges. And he agrees with you a lot. It's just, you don't know what you don't know in May of 2021, and the mandates hadn't come down. So, like, obviously we could see the future with more crystal clarity, but not everyone can, and you have to be patient with them. But then, you have to stand up for human dignity in a way that lends credibility and sincerity. So my favorite political lesson does come from Martin Luther King and his letters to Birmingham jail on how to confront injustice. And I think this is something that we maybe need to teach in public schools as a core, an education standard. Because I think, I was made to read the text, I think twice, once in college, once in high school, but I don't think I really. So the part that stands out that I think is relevant to whatever the issue is, whether it's, DEI in colleges, or whether it's obscene literature in schools, or whether it's someone losing their job over a vaccine, you need to identify the injustice and really document it thoroughly and make it very clear and illustrate the injustice. And then you need to negotiate. You need to approach whoever is committing the injustice, and you need to explain yourself and say, hey, I think we could do this differently. I think you're infringing on human dignity. I think you're harming children, whatever it is. And then the next step in the formula that Martin Luther King describes is, if you can't convince them in negotiation, you have to undergo self-purification. And that self-purification is in preparation of direct action. That, back then in the civil rights, they'd have, civil disobedience and other demonstrations. They marched to Selma. They would try to eat at lunch counters and desegregate. So they were, but their goal in their activism was basically to win over the people in the middle and win over people's hearts and minds to their side by conducting themselves in a very high-minded fashion, a very Christian fashion, a very brotherly love fashion, where if someone is swinging at you, that you take the blows and turn the other cheek, and that you don't strike back.
And he learned that from Gandhi.
Correct. And Gandhi learned it from a lot of other people who explored these ideas. And we've had injustices and we've had atrocities and tragedies. We have it all throughout human history. There's stories of, Christians being sold into slavery and people raising money to buy them free. So it's been a challenge throughout human civilization.
I had Brandon McNace on here, and he runs an organization that does that. I think it's in Pakistan that there are Christian slaves, and they raise money and they go buy them their freedom and then help them get rehabilitated.
Yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and there's kind of a formula. And I think they spell out a very simple 4-step process that we can apply to whatever the issue is. And I see so many people glossing over even the first step. It's like, okay, show me all the relevant evidence. Let's make it crystal clear. Let's get it down in black and white so it's indisputable, so we can at least agree on the facts of the matter. And then, like I said, move forward to negotiation based on those facts.
You were on the front lines and you were fighting there right alongside of us. Why was it so important to you? I mean, there are a lot of legislators that weren't, I would say they weren't as brave, or they were, I mean, the legislature's changed a lot since then, but there was a handful of legislators like you and Eddie Andrews that really stepped to the front lines and said, hey, this is where we're going to draw the line, and battled for that freedom. I mean, how hard was that, going against some of the caucus? And
that was probably the toughest day. And again, that I wasn't just a silent no. We filed amendments and we tried to pick apart the bill, and we ranted and raved on the House floor. So I was very much battling, and it was emotional. I think basically, there's an old saying, I forget who said it, but like in a revolution, don't trust anyone under 40 because they just really won't understand what's going on. And so I think at that point, when COVID was already a year underway at that point, and with the vaccine was out there, I think people were like, okay, let's just give on this and maybe we'll get our life back. They just bought into the propaganda a little bit too much because they thought the reality was still being peddled to them in good faith. So I think the only thing that makes me different was, I have a very active constituency, and it was made clear to me earlier on than most that, okay, there are people who are not operating in good faith, that people are taking advantage of an agenda as a circumstance to, push their agenda or push their propaganda, push their fear. So I recognized that pretty early on. And it's just so weird thinking back, because it was just like, there was a lot of trauma involved, and I think I did kind of block it out a little bit. But no, so I think I just, I got first exposed to the vaccine issue because I had constituents who were very much aware of it. And I think one of the first people I met as a legislator was Lindsay Maher, who was able to walk me through their policy platforms and the problems that they were seeing. And again, came across other Iowans to validate that way of thinking, who had incidents and children injured, et cetera. So by the time COVID came around, vaccine injury was something that I'd already been very interested in. I think another turning point for me was when Bobby Kennedy came to the Informed Choice Conference in 2019. And I just thought his speech was so cool. And, was inspired by him, and then, started listening to more of his work and the Children's Health Defense, and again, how they'd analyzed various pharmaceutical products. So that had already been in kind of my wheelhouse. And then this issue comes up, and it's like, oh, wow. So yeah, I think I was just a little bit more prepared and in the right place at the right time. And then, I was, I guess, a second year legislator at that point. So I think I was a little more full of piss and vinegar, wanting to, pick a fight. Cause I mean, at that time still like, and it still feels like this, the country's slipping away before your eyes. Yeah. And it was also in the wake of that 2020 election and all the questions, all the bamboozling that happened, with that. So there was, a serious concern about, okay, this could be the last stand, and if I don't speak up now, am I going to regret it for the rest of my life? So I definitely remember thinking that.
I wonder too, because I thought that as well. And then the parental rights and the transhumanism issue comes about. And then you think almost that same thing about that. And then, it's like the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. It's like, I thought originally, okay, I'm going to get into this battle and fight for medical freedom and for our right to choose and for our right to protect our children from this stuff. And then I thought I'd be done with that. But then there was another thing and then another thing. And it's like, it's almost, you then just resign yourself to always being in that void to try to fight the, I guess the woke wave or the woke mind virus or whatever you want to call it.
Whatever powers or entities that exist that want to subvert that which is good, subvert that which is honest, disrespect that which is pure and holy. However you want to categorize that. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance.
Yeah.
But yeah, what you described is we're, conservative reactionaries playing whack-a-mole, and the problems are coming in quicker than we have solutions. And some of the problems are pretty serious and generations in the making. We really need to, dig in and dig deep and, hey, how can we confront this? A lot of times it is just speaking truth to things, is the big first step. I say about my job, if I can figure out what's going on and just be able to explain like what actually is happening, that's
one thing that I've always loved about you is you articulate things well around a subject. It's not emotional. It's here's shining light on what's really going on, and you do the research.
Well, and that's exactly what, I love the Gandhi movie because there's a scene in there where he captures it perfectly. He tells his, understudies to, again, just coldly, calmly document what's going on, just coldly and rationally document what is occurring. So it's indisputable. Leave your emotions and your charged, because again, when you get into the realm of hyperbole and when you get into the realm of exaggeration, it undercuts your credit. It undercuts you because it's just not the truth. And I think the truth is powerful. I believe that there is an objective truth. I believe that there is such a thing that exists that every human can look at and say, okay, that is the truth. I think beauty comes from truth. I think just by speaking something truthfully, that alone is enough to create a beautiful outcome. I think even with a lot of health issues too, when it comes to proper diagnoses of conditions, and like the emotional connections to physical ailments, oftentimes just speaking truthfully about what you're feeling or how you've been traumatized, that's an essential step to healing. That healing cannot take place in the absence of truth. So I have that philosophical kind of ethos, and I know you're a philosopher yourself, and I think that's why we kind of get along, because we see things on a more basic metaphysical level on what is and is not occurring within the body politic or the collective consciousness.
Yeah. And when you stick to that, just speaking the truth, it's so much easier. I mean, if it's just, okay, here's what appears to be true. Here's what appears to be the most really compassionate in the long run. I'm going to speak that. I'm not going to attack anybody. I'm just going to be honest. I want the best for you.
And you hinted at the humility. This is how it appears to me. Right. This is my perspective. Right. I'm open to other perspectives, and I'm not going to attack them maliciously, even if they do trigger fear. And I think so much of it is provocative. I think the other side means to provoke us, and they want that emotional reaction because it serves them. So, I think that is true. So I think the humility is another kind of important ingredient, and maybe I'm not always great at that, but it's something. For my faith, we say pride is the original sin. I think that's another kind of big problem we have is the competition of human egos.
Oh yeah.
Certainly how that plays out in Republican Central Committee politics. It's a big problem across the state, and it always has been.
We talked about that. Yeah. This is really the third hour of the podcast because we had dinner, we had great conversation, and I always think, I wish that would have been recorded. Especially when you get to talk about aliens and stuff.
Well, those are the most important topics. So I think the top of my list right now is, again, just that big umbrella word of truth.
Right.
And whatever the truth is, just let us figure it out. Just tell people the truth and say a prayer that they can, do whatever with the information that they choose. Yeah. Same thing with the informed consent, the vaccine choice. With the transgendering of children, don't lie to them and claim that it's some sort of credible medical thing. Just, hey, we're experimenting on you, and it's a medical experiment. We have no idea what's going on.
You'll probably never have an orgasm in your life.
Yeah.
You might get osteoporosis, you might get kidney issues,
these potentialities might exist or have this amount of likelihood. And so, no, that's not the best example because we don't want unregulated medicine and people, bringing back human experimentation.
Yeah, we definitely want to have informed consent.
But for the UFOs, for all the different conspiracy theories, and we do have a big problem now because we're 2 months post a very traumatic event that rocked the American political consciousness, particularly on the Christian conservative right. I'm talking about September 10th and the Charlie Kirk situation.
Yeah, that was tough.
Well, and it's just evolved into basically an endless stream of conspiracy theories. So I don't know all the details, but there's been some gag orders in place, and so there's not a lot of clarity on the FBI's version of events or their investigations and the suspect they've charged. And then you have also very popular media personalities like Candace Owens who are going balls to the wall on various theories, fueled by dramatic vendetta or taking it personally so it's just a very, very dramatic.
I started going down some of those rabbit holes, and I even made a video that I didn't publish. I just thought, I don't want to be a part of that.
That's great discipline.
We had a couple vigils that were amazing. I felt like we honored Charlie,
right,
here in Iowa.
Yeah, and what he represented.
Yeah, and what he represented. It impacted me greatly, and a lot of people I never met him. I didn't know him, but I knew of him and what he was trying to do. And there were so many people that were impacted that didn't realize how impacted they would be by his death.
Well, it was also, I think, one of the first kind of traumatic events for the younger generation.
Yeah.
And then in the social media age where, it's streaming in
and you see
high quality.
It live. Yeah.
Right. And so that was another very disturbing thing. But no, it's just very interesting because we have these traumatic events with no resolution, and then they kind of echo throughout the consciousness, and it creates these fractures and fissures. And of course, on the other side of the spectrum, we have how the lefty people reacted, and now you have teachers suing, making a big federal case of their constitutional right to say something abhorrent, something violent, and wishing death upon people and other awful things, etc. So it's just really, 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 really tragic. Whether it's COVID or this or that, we have these events and we get no resolution, and we're just in a state of confusion. And that's where it's like, okay, just, what would the truth look like? Can humanity handle the truth? There's a famous quip from Jack Nicholson, you can't handle the truth. Yeah. And I think there is some truth to that. Another thing I experienced during the COVID era was how some people would violently react to something that's plainly truthful. And they'd have this very strong
I was
reaction.
Attacked many times I'm early on, I posted the data from our iowa.coronavirus.gov website. Mm-hmm. And because the news was making it sound like 3,000 people died last week.
Right.
And so I just posted the actual figures from our website, which they did a great job tracking injuries, tracking whatever. But it really didn't look in Iowa like much more than the flu. And I posted that. And I got attacked. I mean, I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah, you're putting people at risk by sharing your accurate information.
Right. I was shocked. I mean, that early on, that was when it was early. And I had friends come out and tell me how harmful I was being by promoting the true data.
Well, I think that's what helps you figure out who your real friends are.
Right.
But just how kind of strong, kind of the brainwashing and the bandwagoning is. And then, when you become emotionally invested in something, and when you're gripped with fear and you're operating out of state of fear, you get these very bizarre human behaviors that don't make any sense. They're irrational, and it's incredibly bizarre, sad, tragic. And here we are living, just trying to comprehend what it is that's happening. But I think on that end, though, we do have a bit of an epidemic of mental illness. So I was at the Marionette Miller Meeks town hall, and I've seen some pretty bad, political activists and people acting unruly. I mean, these people were barbarians, and it was just, again, if that's what they...
So they were protesting Miller Meeks?
Yeah, they apparently, they drove an hour and a half down from Iowa City to be as disrespectful as possible, to shout over her. I got there a couple minutes late. By the time I got there, though, there was already a person being dragged out, for screaming and shouting, and he was flailing uncontrollably in a manner that resembled like a possession, like a scene out of The Exorcist, as the sheriff threw him out. And I think the sheriff was incredibly gentle with this person. And thank God law enforcement was there because the mob was just completely out of control. But then they'd also, there's different people would, stand up and rant about something that was totally off topic and made no sense whatsoever. And then what I made the most was like, Marionette was asked about the Van Buren County Hospital, and it was a question from Iowa City, so someone from Iowa City is asking about the local hospital, and Marionette Miller Meeks, like, of course she meets with the hospital all the time. Like, she's very active in every county that she's in, including Van Buren. She's more active than I am. And so I know she meets with these people. She's talked about, all these issues with them, but instead of letting her give an answer, they just shout all over. So again, it's just so, and there's another Democratic politician who just started up and he shouted and got kicked out on purpose, and he had his little staffer person film him while doing it. So again, it's just the dramatic staging of it. These people need to grow up. They're not serious. Yeah. Even if there are problems with Medicaid, like, they're just not showing any competency to govern. Anyway, it was terrifying. And another person, a non-lunatic person, recognized me and came up and goes, "Hey, this is pretty scary." And I was like, yeah, like, these are the people that want to run the government. And that's a sad thing, is as much as our Republican politicians are flawed and have problems, like, there is a pretty thin line of human decency that's standing in the way of these unhinged barbarians.
That's the problem I have. It's like, you can disagree and actually debate and bring your ideas to the table, but when you're screaming and yelling and acting like a lunatic, because I disagree many times with Republicans.
Yeah.
And Miller Meeks, I don't know if anybody asked her, but I would like to ask her about her vaccine tour,
I think everyone's trying to forget about that. I'm glad you have a long memory.
Yeah. Why go around the state giving young Republicans the vaccine?
Yeah. Again, people have to do the best they can with the information they have at the time, and our job is just hopefully have all the information.
I'd like to know if she's changed her mind on that.
Publicly, she's, I think she's been pretty good at picking up which direction things are going.
Okay.
And I think certainly when it comes to vaccine exemptions, I think she's more or less said the right things that need to be said. I think there's probably a lot more that could be done, and I think people are looking for a candidate that are willing to take the conversation to the next step. About Childhood Vaccine Injury Act and about the liability problems with the PrEP Act. And, at your event last month, you had a person that was injured by the COVID vaccine and hit a brick wall when trying to appeal, get compensation for their injury.
Right.
Those are very, very serious problems that still need attention. And I think that's the problem, is like, life just goes on and we sweep all these uncomfortable things under the rug. And now it's just, the things are bursting from the seams and the problems are right in front of us. And I think for the people who spend way too much time online and TV eating up all the fear, gobbledygook, propaganda, pornography or whatever, like, they're literally losing their minds. And that's another thing.
They are. And people are sometimes surprised at things that I don't know. And it's because I don't spend my time doing that.
Yeah.
I feel like my circle of influence is in my city, in my county, in my state, and I'll get information from friends that send me videos or news clips or whatever, but I just don't go and spend hours and hours learning about or getting incensed about things that I have no control over.
Well, so definitely don't get incensed. Maintain that emotional equanimity, because that is, the balance and the source of your power.
I don't get incensed regardless, but I just don't want to go down those rabbit holes. I've caught myself.
I think that's where I've done a good job growing this summer, is I've caught myself in these kind of emotional loops about subjects that really don't have much to do with me. So I'm getting better at noticing that, and just even when these traumatic things happen, giving it a day or two or three to let things unwind a little bit before, jumping to a conclusion or getting bent out of shape.
There was a period I went through, I believe, when it was battling for protecting our kids, that I was starting to get a little bit, what do I want to say, negative, because when I entered this thing, I was praying daily, practicing contemplative prayer, very calm and centered most all the time.
Yeah.
And then, but as we fought these battles, and it just got to be so much, so many hours, so whatever. And then I had to take a step back and say, okay, wait a minute. Who am I? I bring peace to the conversation.
And again, it's really great to have that recognition and self-reflection. I think the big thing on that, though, is, you were against some of the most vile opponents out there. These are people that want to, separate children from their parents, to, force this very, very questionable and dangerous concepts and gender theories down their throat. So those are some of those vile political opponents today that are willing to subvert medicine, subvert the family relationship, discredit public schools entirely with the stuff they push. So, I mean, again, thank you and all the men like you for being able to stand in the arena and hold the line, because I know you were instrumental in everything that we've done the last 3 years. But before I forget, I just want to mention this, because one of the problems we have as a state and a nation is the proliferation of neurodegenerative diseases, so Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And just throwing that, because my problem is I get exposed to so much information, it's hard for me to keep it organized. But like I recently came across something basically theorizing that all this digital device exposure, all the blue light, and the way the flicker rate affects your brain chemistry and your nervous system, that could be accelerating some of the neurodegenerative diseases. That maybe people who spend a lot of time on the internet or on the screens in their 30s and 40s, maybe that's possibly why we're seeing more of these symptoms in patients younger and younger. So that's another huge kind of canary in the coal mine. Is the Alzheimer's, Parkinson's type chronic illness issues. They're very expensive. They're very debilitating to families. It's a tragedy. And basically it's your brain is failing itself. Aluminum contamination is another big heavy culprit in this, and how that could cross the blood-brain barrier and things like that.
How does the blue light affect you?
It depends on who you ask. There's this guy named Dr. Jack Kruse, who is basically a light fanatic, and he believes that the blue light necessarily stresses out your mitochondria. Basically, all life, including human beings, are very, very sensitive to their light environments, and the light triggers a lot of endocrine functions in the human body. And so I think blue light is often more associated with cortisol. And so, if you're exposed to blue light at night or right in the morning, you're disrupting your circadian rhythm in a way where maybe other endocrine functions might not process correctly. So I don't know the exact technical details. I think you have access to an AI.
Right.
But Dr. Jack Kruse, I don't know if you spend time on the Twitter.
I'm not on X too as much as I need to
spend about an eighth of the time. I mean, I spend too much time on there, but it is incredible just how much information is out there, because you can see someone like Dr. Jack Kruse commenting on current events, responding to commenters, having other people's perspective on it. But there's a lot of different of these X communities of people who are exploring a lot of these alternative health topics. And again, just when we look at how dysfunctional modern medicine is, light is one of those things.
So here's I just asked ChatGPT about it.
Well, don't trust that son of a bitch.
Well, okay. So why blue light can be bad? It suppresses melatonin. Blue light tells your brain, wake up, it's daytime. Can cause insomnia, difficulty falling asleep, low quality sleep, disrupted circadian rhythm, which you just mentioned. Eye fatigue, dry eyes, headaches, blurred vision. I don't think it gets into the mitochondria.
So it's a pretty deep topic. One book that was published like 50 years ago is called Health and Light, which kind of documents one person's trying to pioneer the topic and how he was kind of shut out of medical institutions despite having a lot of credible evidence. So it's something that is not well understood, light radiation and how it affects human physiology, but we know that it does. And again, it's not unique to humans. I mean, plants behave differently under different light spectrums. Same with animals.
Yeah, I think it's good to get up and go walk out in the sunlight first thing in the morning.
Yeah, so what you want is natural light or full light spectrum, and then you want to time it right, that if you're in the evening trying to unwind, you're not unnecessarily exposed to blue light. So yeah, there's a lot going on there, and it's a very important topic. Same with, again, everything else on the electromagnetic radiation spectrum, that basically everywhere within civilized world now, you're going to be exposed to various amounts of frequencies, from Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, from your own personal device, from other equipment towers. Even your televisions emit radiation. There's dirty electricity current whenever voltage is transmitted through a current or whatever. There's dirty electricity byproducts. So there's a lot of that in the environment that is just not very well understood. And so now there is, a lot of people in the alternative health space trying to look at electromagnetic radiation treatments. It's more popular in Germany. I think it's called like Rife Technology is one of the brand names associated with it. But even on the lights thing, I mean, I know there's at least another legislator who wears like the blue light blocking glasses.
Yeah, I think my wife wears those at work. if she doesn't lose them.
Well, and if you're looking at a screen for a long period of time, there is a theoretical benefit for it, and people can experiment what they think is best.
Yes, definitely. Last night I was at a chiropractor's office, and they were giving some information about hyperbaric chambers, HBOTs, and how that can help heal the brain from brain injury, heal wounds, etc., PTSD. And actually there's going to be some legislation, I think, that's going to be promoted that would help pay for veterans to have that therapy. And I think over 40 sessions, they have all sorts of data, how they've been cured of PTSD and brain injury and things like that.
Yeah, I believe hyperbaric oxygen has been approved for, FDA approved for a collection of different ailments. I know it's very popular. I have a practitioner back home who got some equipment and is offering it up and offers sessions. Same thing with even carbon dioxide. So there's a lot to just respiration in general, whether it's oxygenating or using carbon dioxide in certain ways. So there's a recent book by a guy named James Nestor, I think it was a year or two ago, about breathing and how, again, different breath patterns can affect the physiology as well. So it's, again, there's just a lot there.
Yeah, I was at Iowa HBOT. Yeah, breathing's important. I mean, I've practiced a lot of meditation and yoga and breath work. I've done a lot of breath work, and I mean, you can calm yourself in just a couple breaths, slow your heart rate, your physiology. It's all about the breath,
Well, and then I think
calm your emotions.
Some people have a distinct preference for nostril breathing, nostrils, breathing through your nose, in order to fully develop whatever that cavity is.
I've always learned to breathe through my nose. Abdominal breathing. Yeah.
So there is something to that, even in how the human face develops and how the jaw forms, and another thing too with like kids who have overbites and need a lot of orthodontia work. A lot of it is people are learning maybe they didn't work their jaw muscles out well enough. Maybe they need to chew harder foods. We've all been chewing really, really soft foods. When you look at some of the more underdeveloped or less developed areas of the world where they have very hard food diets, a lot of them do have, perfect orthodontia, straight teeth, beautiful white teeth. So there's a lot that we don't know. And there's a lot of things, ailments, conditions, detriments that are affected, from civilization, from our industrial capacity and from living in cities. And so it's just, we have a very interesting set of problems. And
where are we at on education?
Oh, I don't know. I think
I know we got the DEI bill passed, although there was the amendment that excluded private schools.
Private colleges.
I think,
I guess private, the accredited non-publics would also be exempt too. But that hasn't been as much of a problem from what we've been seeing. And theoretically, if, we do believe in school choice. The problem with DEI is that it's basically racial discrimination. So, and this is the other thing too about how DEI means different things to different people, and a lot of people just don't understand. The people who are most in favor of DEI are the ones who have the faintest idea of how it's actually being applied. But Iowa Code, because it's a funny thing, so Iowa Code defined DEI as basically differential treatment or special privileges on the basis of race or gender.
Right.
So racism, the idea that, okay, we're going to give a black person a special privilege, or we're going to give a black person an opportunity that we're not going to give to a white person. You're excluding them. So it's actually the opposite of inclusion. You're excluding people. And so I gave people the definition of DEI, and all the Democrats are like, well, no, that's not what I'm talking about. And so even for all these like college faculty people who are like really insisting they need DEI and that the DEI restrictions are impairing their academic freedom, I would love to just sit them down and hear examples of that. Maybe we do need some government oversight committees to look into what these college faculty actually think. More recently, the college faculty got offended by the words excellence and neutrality. The Trump administration, to their credit, one of the things they have been doing is trying to rein in higher ed. And they had a compact with colleges and universities, and they said they wanted academic neutrality and they wanted excellence. more or less unambiguous words. I think something most people would agree on. And all of a sudden, the college faculty pretend like these things are the worst things in the world. I mean, who's opposed to excellence?
Right.
The college faculty at University of Iowa. Like that's who.
Somehow that's now a marginalizing term. Or
something. Yeah, it's offensive because some people are excellent, and how dare we strive to become better people, or how dare we admire people who can achieve. So it's completely backwards. I think that's the problem, is that there's been this intellectual parasite of this very ungrateful, entitled thought form that sees civilization and just takes it for granted and feels that they can re-engineer things. They want to play God with man or whatever. And it's very much Marxist thinking that divides people into oppressors and oppressed, and therefore it can justify violence against the oppressed class, because they don't believe in an objective standard or being judged by anything. They make up the rules. And so if their action serves their political ends, the ends justify the means. So therefore they can conduct themselves in any depraved way, any deceitful way, as long as it advances their agenda. And this kind of idea, this materialism, has enrooted it, enshrined itself in a lot of institutions of higher education. And it's been there for a couple generations now. And at the very least, it needs to be not subsidized, and we need to ensure. Well,
you had said when we were eating dinner that something about the Iowa tuition grant, that we just needed to get rid of it.
Yeah, I'm not really interested in subsidizing private colleges anymore. But again, we still have issues at the university level. So we got a new president coming into Iowa State. He's from Ames. He's a homegrown Iowa boy. Seems like a pretty good guy. But again, you have a faculty that is entrenched that has very, very strange theories on education, social values, and social cohesion.
Well, we've talked about this, like A Critical Turn in Education.
Yeah, which was
Gottsman's book, all about getting Marxism back into the school system.
And basically. That book was about how they were succeeding and that it was a fate accomplished.
And it was celebrated.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and so we have the same thing in the private colleges too. A lot of private colleges are under financial stress because the economics of a $30,000 a year tuition liberal arts degree just isn't there. So it's a very privileged upper middle class kind of demographic, and I think a lot of it too is these people who have received blessings in their life, that have privilege, that were born to a mother and father who loved them and had a good income. I think a lot of them have like a guilty feeling for it because they see, I have all this financial prosperity, but the world is an unjust place. Therefore,
I don't have any guilt. I grew up poor, youngest of 8, had to pay for everything I ever earned, and so there's been times, and I was on a call one time with a couple people from Black Lives Matter because somebody saw how I handled situations and they needed some help with something, and they thought that maybe I could collaborate. And I thought, sure, I can collaborate with anyone. And so I get on this Zoom call, and I spent 30 minutes hearing about my white privilege. And I finally said, look, you know what? You're more privileged than I am.
Yeah.
You're a upper middle class, whatever, silver spoon in your mouth, and I was born poor. Mm-hmm. And I drywalled my own bedroom when I was in 8th grade.
Right.
And I earned every penny and it was a challenge, and I had to work hard to become successful. But they didn't want to accept that. But I sat there for literally probably 30 minutes listening to.
That's way too long to be subject to that. But just imagine how damaging that is to social cohesion, that again, these people know nothing about you and they assume everything, and they have some sort of moral twist that they're imposing a fictitious morality on you, and they're judging you on the color of your skin. That's racial microaggressions.
And what I thought the call was about was them wanting to build a community organization, and it sounded like a good thing. And I was just going to give them some ideas on how to do it. But what I found was they didn't want to do anything positive. And I try to get them to, okay, what is the positive outcome we want to achieve? Well, we need to tear everything down and dig up the foundations, and it was all vagary. And there was no really action steps to actually achieving anything that was identifiable as goodness or whatever.
Well, so this is ultimately the divide that we have in this country is you have one side of the country that thinks America is a beautiful place, a land of opportunity, the land that veterans fought and died for. And yeah, might have had some challenges along the way. And again, like we said before, we celebrate men like Martin Luther King with federal holidays because of the way they were able to peacefully advance the mission of human justice and gave their life in doing so.
It's we should be teaching our kids that this is the one of the greatest countries in the world.
That's why everyone wants to be here.
Yeah.
But then you have the other side, which, America was founded on racism. It was never good. Everything that might have been good was actually stolen from other people, exploited, and they'll use terms like genocide. And it is, so you have a tremendous divide in identity around the basic questions of what it needs to be an American, and is this country a place worth having, or is this country the epitome of human greed and human injustice, etc. So it's very, very hard for those ideas to live in society together. They're very, very polarizing, and there's like you said, there's really not any bridge or reconciliation if the other side isn't interested. And again, it makes no sense, right? Because if all white people were racist, well, in my neck of the woods in Southeast Iowa, we have all sorts of underground railroad exhibitions. The Republican Party was founded on the promise of abolition of slavery. A lot of those people were white. So, again, the idea of casting the broad brush of all white people are privileged and racist. Well, does that include the people who helped smuggle slaves into freedom? So that's why, again, like they're making this fictitious history when if we just focused on the actual local history we do have, we could actually give.
We were one of the first states to abolish slavery, right? Or was it to...
We protected a fugitive slave in the matter of Ralph, I believe is the caption.
Oh,
and it was the first thing before the Iowa Supreme Court, and there was a guy named Ralph, and I guess he was a fugitive slave, and we said he can live here, I think is the case. And then, we were on the forefront of integration of public schools long before it was even a national issue. Iowa has always been on the side of civil rights. Same, with the Republican Party in a lot of ways. And so that's why even the discussions that we had at the Capitol this year about what our civil rights code, is just very important.
Did you talk to, did you see the interview I had with Shelley Flockhart?
Unfortunately, no, I'm sorry.
Well, she's been battling with her school for...
I know a little bit about the situation, and she was victorious in her city council race, so we should give her congratulations.
She
thank her for stepping up and graduating into higher responsibility and leadership in the state.
Well,
that's huge.
She's fought for over a year. They have an American Dream class in her school,
right?
And it's all about how the American Dream is not real, or how it's not real for anybody that's not white.
What an inspirational message to give to our youth. Well, and how disrespectful it is too. Like, I can't even think of anything more demeaning than seeing a black person and saying, you're not going to get ahead unless me, a white person, helps give you equity in this supremacist system or whatever. Like, in that, you're a black person, therefore, you have all these things working against you that you can't overcome without systemic help. And even Malcolm X talked about this, he called him the white liberal, again, this white knight. There's people who think blacks can't do it for themselves, that they need some white savior to help them. And it's incredibly demeaning. It's incredibly egotistical. It's completely out of touch. It's the arrogance and pride that we see, again, from a lot of these upper middle class yuppie types who, just think they can make the world better, but they're making it worse because they are just, so clouded by, again, the propaganda and these false ideas.
And now we're going to have a whole generation that has to learn this stuff on their own because they've been indoctrinated.
Well, so thankfully, at least from the numbers, the things I've seen is there has been a significant right-wing backlash, particularly among young men. But I think the other thing that people may not understand is there is a lot of revolutionary potential if people do not see a future for themselves, if they do not see a path forward, if they feel like the system is leaving them behind. Like we saw in the Black Lives Matter stuff, like it can turn, kinetic, it can get pretty ugly. And so if you have a generation of children that are looking at homes that are unaffordable and, careers that are not going to be sustainable, or they're losing their jobs to immigrants or whatever it is, like that's going to create. So we have a very interesting generational divide growing where a lot of the Generation Z and the young people, a lot of them are becoming radicalized in both directions because they're not satisfied with what they're seeing in the world. I went through a little phase myself too when I went to University of Iowa my first couple of years. You know, I had a little bit of a radical bent and took a while to get kind of straightened out and realize, well, hey, you know, there's more to life than complaining about things. You know, you could actually be a good person and, you know, start with yourself. You know, the old Michael Jackson always applies, you know, make sure you're looking very closely at the man in the mirror and being the change you wish to see in the world. I think that's a great starting point that, you know, should be taught in schools. So it's a gigantic problem. And that's the other problem too with this brainwashing and propaganda is it doesn't necessarily wash off very easily. But I think a lot of people are seeing through it. And thankfully, a lot of people are standing up. And we need to do a better job enforcing the laws we have, because I think a lot of the problem, you know, it was 2021 that we first passed a ban on critical race theory and divisive concepts. And here we are 4.5 years later.
And we were battling that. I think what we saw is, okay, our kids were at home on their computers doing school. The minute they got back to school, they were being masked. And then we were seeing these things come home from school. And we were seeing things like that.
It mushroomed up during COVID. It had always, you know, there'd always been kind of a little bit of a presence there, but like it, you know, it made its move during COVID with the Black Lives Matter hysteria.
Well, then there was a bunch of money, because I remember like social emotional learning, Castle had said there's a epidemic now of racism and of emotional issues. And then they took a lot of money to build those programs like SEL and
all I know is
Second Step and
the legislature needs to do a better job enforcing the laws we have, enforcing the standards. We're in the process of rewriting the social studies curriculum standards right now. So hopefully the Board of Education comes back with a product that's satisfactory. Otherwise, we're going to have to do it again. But to the extent that we have those problems, I mean, we need to find a way to cut funding or yank licenses or have some sort of very serious repercussions. We had a problem in Fairfield. Again, this is all ancient history now, but at the time, you know, it was, again, we had an educator who, he was very clearly in there to indoctrinate students. He had one of those Ibram X. Kendi books, the one for middle schoolers, forget exactly the title of it, but yeah, it's basically, again, America steeped in racism, American identity, you know, being white is racist, and to deny it shows you're racist, and America's racist. And this guy was giving it to 8th graders. You know, a superintendent and the school board member tried to straighten him out and just say, hey, this probably isn't the best text. Anyway, he threw a fit, and and it was so stupid because in the law, like the law clearly says, like nothing in this will prevent the teaching of slavery or the history of racial discrimination, etc. And this guy, again, I don't know if they just pretend to be stupid or what, but he's like, they're not even letting me teach slavery. And it's like, you have to read the law. And so they make up these fictitious things that have no bearing in reality. And it's this malicious compliance too, you know, and it's all just so fake and dramatic. But it does work because a lot of the media plays along with it.
When you say that, it reminds me of watching debates on the debate floor, and I'll hear the Democrats debate and make accusations about what this legislation is going to do to people. And I think, have you even read the legislation? Because it's like they make up a narrative about the legislation, then they argue that narrative. They don't actually argue the points of the legislation. Then the Republican has to come back and say, well, that's not what the bill says. Have you read the bill? I
think there's a lot of deliberate obfuscation there. I think so it's most important on the big bills, right? Like, so the gender identity thing, for example.
I heard that a lot.
Well, so there's a lot in there. There's a lot in the Civil Rights Code. There's a lot of things that theoretically could happen. So the opponents, they kept bringing out these examples. Oh, you're going to kick people out of their homes. You're going to deny them financial services. You're going to deny them an education. But really what it was about is it all boils down to where the big money was, is in the financing, the Medicaid, the insurance paying for these transgender drugs and surgeries. So yeah, that's why you had such a well-funded opposition to it, is because there is a big money question there. And so again, technically, yeah, you're making these changes to the law, but it's a totally made up thing. Like if you're a transgender person in a job, you're not going to lose your job tomorrow because of this. But they do they really do think that. Like, so again, it's just this this victimhood mentality which supersedes the reality, where again they're approaching the world in a way where they think the world is against them. So again, they're going to see things that reinforce their narrative. But no, so it's incredibly kind of difficult, if someone wants to be victimized or wants to have an issue, they're going to cause problems no matter what. But yeah, so there's just a tremendous amount of obfuscation and a lot of distraction from the real issues, because that was the real issue: is does Iowa Medicaid compelled by law to pay for these things? Right. And a lot of other related questions to that too.
And we could talk about that all day. I've got 6 books there about it. We've both hosted forums on it.
You came down to Mount Pleasant for Chloe Cole. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, we brought her down, and I've had her
she's still got she's still got a lawsuit going. I think her legislation is still active. And
Laura
that's
Becker. I brought her to the Capitol, and she spoke at the hearing on the What is a Woman bill.
Well, and you were at all those hearings. And again, just thank you so much for standing the gap and being able to see the chaos firsthand. Because again, those are the people. Like again, it's just that angry mob is like, okay, do we really want these people to run roughshod over the state, or what are going to be the forces of good, that constrain this? Because again, it's just very, very interesting what these people believe and what they advocate for and what they're willing to say out loud. It's very strange.
Do you want to get into transhumanism at all?
I mean, a little. I think it's important. I think if people want to understand the transgender phenomenon, if people want to understand gender theory, they need to understand the connection to transhumanism. And so I don't even use the word transgender anymore. I just call them transhumans. And it's basically the idea that technology can overcome biological reality. That according to Martin Rothblatt, one of the billionaire people pushing this. And the other thing too is this whole thing's very synthetic. This isn't really a grassroots movement up. It's foisted on the top down from a handful of very well financed, very well connected activist groups that then leverage grants to medical institutions and universities to push this agenda from the top down, like we're seeing in the state of Illinois with Jennifer Pritzker and the Pritzker billionaire family. And Illinois is the great example of the transhuman agenda, how they want this. So the big piece to the resistance in Illinois was they finally have the mandatory mental health screening now for all their public school students, where they can psychologically prime kids to be transgender. So in Illinois, you have all the state funding of the gender medicine, which is basically easy money for the companies that sell these products. Then you have the state and the schools advertising the transgender ideology, and then also planting the idea in their head and screening them for it to get them into this pipeline in the mental health screening. And then you also have the separation of children from parents who object to it. So all those state policies together work in concert as a massive influx of cash to the transgender capitalists who are investing in this, who are commodifying human sexuality, who are deconstructing humans and basically turning us into Mr. Potato Head dolls where you can buy and sell body parts is kind of how it is. So what Martine Rothblatt, Dr. Rothblatt explains in her book, Transgender to Transhuman, is that, maybe biological differences made sense in the Stone Age or a few hundred years ago when men really were stronger than women, and there were differences that played out. But now with technology, all those differences have more or less become obsolete because women can do anything a man can do with the assistance of technology, machines, tools, computers, and that also those differences can be overcome with synthetic hormones and drugs and surgeries. And so the big thing about gender theory, and there's a lot to it because it's the concept of a person's internal identity that's incongruent with their self. So it's, again, this born in the wrong body concept, which really makes no sense whatsoever, but gets pushed. But then it's further, and this is in state law, by the way, it's the idea that the incongruence of gender can be corrected or made congruent with the application of, these drugs, synthetic hormones, surgeries, et cetera. And so that really is this key part that, there's something wrong with your body, and it needs to be fixed with technology. And therefore that technology can overcome the biological limitations that our our place and time on human evolution, we've reached such a point in time where we're no longer bound or restricted by this ancient concept of biological sex because technology has made it irrelevant. And therefore any differentiation on sex is discriminatory and apartheid. That's the word she used. She calls it a gender apartheid. Saying that boys and little girls in schools use separate restrooms is the same as saying blacks and whites can't be at the drinking fountain together. That's literally the language they use. And she's a billionaire person, attorney, and she's the one who's helping promote these legal constructs in legal codes all over the world. So it's incredibly insidious. It's funded by billionaires. It's based on the commodification of human sex. Again, what we're seeing now tied into being able to buy and sell humans through surrogacy.
Where does the obsession for this come from? I mean, this person is the founder of SiriusXM.
Yeah, they've been in big tech for a while. They're very successful.
CEO of major biotech company. Why? I just don't understand where the drive comes to push this so hard that they get behind, there are tentacles and everything, and just feel like they need to change society.
Yeah, it's a hyper capitalist move where it's, again, there's tremendous money to be made. You know, if there's state mandated gender treatments to every kid who claims to be confused or whatever, that's a tremendous cash. So I think we have to be very realistic.
And we've had all these clinics pop up all over the United States.
It exploded over the last 10 years, you know, or in the last decade. Now that's starting to reverse a little bit. And I think, you know, we were able to shut down the youth clinics, but we still have these adult transgender clinics.
Yeah.
And
I believe it's because we're capitalist. I mean, because in a socialist society, which we want to get away from, but there's not as much money in medicine. So there's more of a capitalist. It's like, okay, if I can treat a burn victim and make $7,000 by fixing the thing on their arm, or I can do a trans surgery and make $70,000.
Well, have you heard some of those people being interviewed? Or there's a lot of anecdotal evidence going around of plastic surgeons getting into this because it is such lucrative line of work that you can fill your schedule and make money hand over fist, by doing these things. Now, I think the phenomenon has cooled off a little bit.
Oh, I think so.
It was very socially edgy and cool, especially in the wake of the pandemic. And then again, like every fad, whether it's Tamagotchis or Pokemon or whatever the heck these kids are into these days, give it a couple of years, it's a little less cool. But there still is that network supporting it, and a lot of it is very predatory. As you've heard the stories of Chloe Cole and others.
Chloe, Laura.
These are confused kids looking for validation. A lot of them have been harmed or traumatized in some way. I think there's the other thing too.
Some of them are on the spectrum as well.
They
already have kind of a
neurological diversities and other needs. And you're very much aware of this too. The differences between how trans males experiencing gender dysphoria versus females experiencing gender dysphoria. They're actually really two different things.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of it is we have this hyper pornography culture, which is completely...
Stacey Besh and I talked about that.
She's coming down to Van Buren County. I need to listen to that. I was so happy to see her.
Yeah.
I can't wait to meet her, and again, hopefully work with her. Is
she going to show the movie Grid Shock?
I keep seeing advertisement on my Facebook, so
you gotta watch it, man.
Yeah, it's coming to Van Buren County, and all the local businesses are advertising it. So whoever's doing that is doing a great job, because I'm seeing it.
I told her that she needed to get Kleenex to sponsor her events.
Oh, is it that sad?
It's that bad. I mean, it's rough. I mean, she does such a great job.
How long is the film?
I think it's only like 50 some minutes maybe, or something like that.
Does it touch on illegal immigration too, or no?
No.
Okay.
But it really kind of lifts the veil on what trafficking really is in Iowa.
So that's a huge problem. And since we have an audience here, hopefully there's people still listening. I think right now there's 2 agents dedicated to human trafficking in Iowa compared to over 50 that are assigned to the casinos. And so I think the legislature really needs to correct that and make sure we're putting teams of dedicated agents who are full-time assigned to interdicting and preventing and prosecuting human trafficking. So we were able to fix state statute. Now we can charge them under state law, but we need to make sure we have dedicated law enforcement personnel, and it's going to take an investment.
The thing that really just shook me was that these guys that do this, they'll get into schools and colleges and wherever, and they'll find these girls, and they won't kidnap them. It's not like a kidnapping thing. It's like they're being extorted.
Psychological seduction.
Psychological, extorted, fear. They might even chip them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they chip these girls.
So there's drugs involved.
Drugs. So this girl could be going to school at Iowa, which happens often, and then she's being whisked away to being trafficked, and then back to school, and on campus and whatever else. And this happens all the time.
That's one of the biggest problems too, is a lot of people, children especially, are naive to the nature of evil, and that, if you find yourself in a bad situation, sometimes it can be hard to get out of that. So I've certainly learned a lot. But yeah, I mean, there's serious issues, and that's why you got to keep your nose clean. Make sure you have a lot of family and friends who love you and care about you, that, if something were to happen for you, that, they'd be there for you because a lot of it is isolation, right? If people get caught up on these things. So anyway, but I think, just to reiterate, we do need to address more resources on this in the state. That needs to happen in the justice system.
And
budget.
Mark Thompson is doing a lot with that.
Have you had him on? You haven't had him?
I haven't yet, but I need to. I just learned. I've learned a lot more about what he's doing.
Now, Stacy's running for office, right?
Right.
So
Senate.
It needs to happen, or we need to get new legislators in there who will make it happen. And I'm excited to meet Stacy. And
that should be like a full court press. We should be putting a ton of resources into that.
It touches on a lot of different conspiracy theories on who might be benefiting from such an arrangement. So
yeah, interesting. I kind of wanted to talk about psilocybin because, everybody, the big hot topic is the bill that was vetoed about eminent domain, but there was also a bill vetoed that would have allowed synthetic psilocybin to be used for medicinal purposes.
Yeah, so I applauded the veto, and I apologize for voting for that bill. This is the problem we have in medicine is, so to get something FDA approved, it needs to go through extensive clinical trials to, collect evidence and demonstrate its effectiveness. A lot of those cost tens of millions of dollars. So it is a big capital investment to even approach the FDA approval process, which of course is no guarantee. So the problem is that creates, you need to be able to market and sell a drug. You need to have something you can patent and profit off of in order to go through that process. And so that's why a lot of natural remedies that are ineligible for patent don't necessarily get the research or attention they deserve, because there's just not a financial incentive on something you can't patent. So this group, Compass Pathways, they had a synthetic formula of psilocybin that they had synthetically altered to give them a pathway to a patent, that therefore they could then test against depression and get approval to market it as a depression treatment, which is fine. And so what the bill does is basically just rescheduled that compound to make it available for medicine, which is where we need to solve the problem. We need to fix the drug scheduling. Right now, psilocybin is Schedule 1, which means high potential for abuse and no potential for medicine. And it's certainly not that. I think it's probably closer to something like Schedule 4, where I don't know the exact differentiation, but it needs to be further down there, because there is increasingly a lot of recognition.
Can we do that as a state?
The state can, but you still have superseding federal law. What's really interesting is how it bumps up against the Religious Freedom Restoration Act framework, because if someone claims this as a religious sacrament or whatever, and if they're able to demonstrate their sincerity, then the state would need to articulate a compelling interest on being able to restrict that. And so that's really the key question that the legislature needs to address, is for just the pure substance psilocybin, which can be grown from, because you have to think that for a while the spores were legal because the spores did not actually have the active ingredient yet. You have to fruit the mushroom and then harvest the psilocybin. So I don't know if it's still the case, but people could buy and sell spores online and then just do it yourself at home. So there still was the trafficking and the potential, material to create this in an unregulated format. But basically, the legislature needs to figure out what is the criminal potential of psilocybin. Why is the possession or use of psilocybin in of itself a criminal act? And because certainly any activity that came from that, like disorderly conduct is a criminal charge. There's the psilocybin itself doesn't need to be criminal. It's all the activity that could potentially be criminal from that. So why is it criminal? What is the harm to the state by just possessing this, or perhaps using it in, your own personal setting in a way that doesn't interfere with anyone else? And there really isn't any sort of criminal reason for it, because frankly, it's not connected to a lot of crime. It's very self-regulating. In places where they have loosened up restrictions, like in Denver, they haven't really seen any impact negatively in the way that maybe you've seen in other areas or other drugs that have been liberalized or decriminalized. I don't believe that psilocybin has much criminal potential in and of itself, and that any potential disruptive activity that might stem from irresponsible use is already criminal of itself. So I think if you got rid of, if you rescheduled psilocybin tomorrow, I don't think you'd see much difference. One, because a lot of people are already using it on their own. They're taking their health in their own hands, or their recreation in their own hands.
Did you see that Netflix series, How to Change Your Mind? It was in 2022. It was a 4-episode docuseries covering LSD, psilocybin, NDMA, and mescaline. And it went into depth on the medicinal purposes with PTSD and things like that. And
I did
it
not.
It was really eye-opening. Yeah, really interesting.
Well, so there's a lot of substances in this classification. So they've classified in a lot of different ways. Some people will call them, psychedelics. Some people like to use the term entheogens, which actually has a kind of a spiritual component to it. But yeah, basically substances that can expand perception in ways that might be somewhat radical. And basically what's happening is the psilocybin is allowing a more neuroplastic kind of state where your brain can kind of form new connections. Neuroplasticity, we have habits, and it literally the neural pathways form ruts in our brain, and it becomes hard to get out of a rut. The psilocybin helps you kind of re-examine that neural pathway and form new connections. So, and then the big thing is that with just like a single treatment session, you see compounding positive events. That if someone has a psilocybin session, you follow them up a year later, and their improvement trajectory continues, versus the current model of medicine where, okay, you have to take this pill every day for the rest of your life, and if you miss a day, you might snap and do something stupid. So psychiatry, psychopharmacology, all these neuroscience, it's very much an emerging field. Like, so I'm not one who just wants to encourage people to go ahead and experiment or whatever, be very, very careful. And one of the scariest things I've had is I've had people come up to me at the Capitol and they ask me about mushrooms, and they're taking all sorts of other medications. They're seeing a psychiatrist, they're seeing a shrink, and they've tried, SSRIs or, different varieties or combinations of things. And I'm like, well, first of all, we have no idea on potential contraindications of how things could work. So it's who knows what could potentially happen in combination. But thankfully, especially if you start with small doses and if you just have a lot of common sense, I think common sense is incredibly important. I think for people who might get into trouble are going to be young people who, like I said before, are naive and, might not realize how stupid things can be. But I think for most adults who, have some life behind them and have some common sense and some good life experience, most of them, I think, could navigate psilocybin beneficially on their own. Certainly if you start with a lower dose and kind of dip your toe in the water and get further in as you so desire. So I think it is has a lot to offer in the future, and the conversations here. So we did pass a bill in the House to create a psilocybin licensing program, but we're still awaiting hearing in the Senate. And I want to give a shout out to John Wills for helping lead that effort.
What are the details around that?
Basically, it would be you'd have a board appointed by the Director of Health and Human Services. It's structured very similar to how the Medical Cannabidiol Board operates, where they grant license to manufacturers and it's supervised. And it kind of gives some details on the type of people that they'd want to be appointed. Someone who has experience in creating pharmaceutical drugs. So even something like Senator Doug Campbell up near Mason City, he would be a great candidate for this as well, with his pharmacological background. So yeah.
Yeah, he was explaining to me some of the scientific properties around it and how it regrew cells and re-stimulated. I mean, just amazing stuff.
Well, again, yeah. So there's a lot of potential applications that we're still learning about. And again, I warned about improper combinations before, but there's also, other ways you can combine things to prevent. So like the big popular one that Paul Stamos was talking about was a combination of lion's mane and psilocybin. And, lion's mane.
Now, Paul was on Rogan, right?
He's been on, I think, a couple of times. I think I first saw him probably, 6 or 7 years ago, but he's been around the space for a while. And I think he was basically this neuroregeneration idea. So even going back to what we're talking about with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, maybe taking a small dose of lion's mane and psilocybin could be a good preventative for that. So just a good neurological supplement to just keep your brain healthy and make sure your brain has whatever it needs to, keep those connections firing.
So the board would allow licensing around that for practitioners.
Yeah, that was the idea, and would basically create a standard of care of, if you want to be a licensed practitioner of psilocybin therapy, this is the way you'd have to do it.
And that passed the House?
Passed the House, yep.
Really? Wow.
Yep, passed the House. And then again, I don't know what future it has in the Senate. I think the Senate's still a little bit, they're not as well researched.
If it's passed the House, does it have to go back through the House in another session?
Not necessarily. It still should be a live round. If the Senate wanted to pick it up in January, I believe they can.
What's the committee that runs through?
I think if it's Senator Dawson, I don't know if that's public safety or what, but I think it's Senator Dawson who has a criminal, he's DCI agent over in Council Bluffs, and a lot of law enforcement are just somewhat skeptical, because they have experiences too with, they see a lot of
somebody that's taking
abuse.
A whole bunch and whacked out.
I don't think that's ever actually happened, but because that was the thing. I forget which meeting it was, because we had our first meeting was 2021, then we had a slightly better meeting in 2023, and then we finally had a meeting in 2025. At one of the meetings, one of the opponents were just saying things that I don't think there's any evidence of. So I think some people jump to conclusions based on things they may be seen in the media or elsewhere. But again, if you want to see people going crazy, there's, go to Iowa City on a Saturday night, you can pick up a bottle of booze and lose your mind on the Ped Mall. It happens all the time. People getting drunk driving accidents, people over ingest alcohol and die on game day. Hasn't happened lately, but it used to be a reoccurring thing. I mean, so again, psilocybin. Again, like I said, I'm not encouraging anyone to do anything reckless. Always say your prayers, use common sense. But when you look at what else is available, with over the counter, that is very, very dangerous. So that's what's always kind of blown my mind away is okay, the discrepancy between alcohol, which alcohol is very heavily correlated with violent crime and, domestic abuse and all this stuff. Yet we tolerate it. We condone it. We advertise it all the time.
I'm having a bourbon right now.
Yeah. And thankfully you're not,
I'm not driving
subject to violent tempers or anything, but
no.
But at least for me personally, I used to do a lot of stupid things when I was younger, and a lot of that was fueled by alcohol. And
the dumbest things you ever do are when you're drinking.
And so, just again, our relationship between substances and what could be considered responsible use. If it's possible to use alcohol responsibly, I would posit it's also possible to use psilocybin responsibly.
Right. No, that makes sense. So what are the big things on your agenda for this next session? Everyone seems to have their projects, sometimes just based on what their constituents are asking of them. What's on your list of things that you'd like to accomplish?
So one, I think that this is going to be a big session. There are a lot of questions before the people of Iowa. There are a lot of questions in the Republican Party of policy disagreements that have fractured our party and caused some division that still need to be ironed out. So I think the first thing I just want to say that I want to make sure that we do the very best job we can for the voters, that we can go into 2026 with a full head of steam and say, look at all the great work that we did for you. So obviously, I think the most important thing is the property tax conversation. I'm not on Ways and Means, so I don't really have a front row seat to that. But Carter Nordman is the new Ways and Means chair, I believe. And so he's got his work cut out for him. And what a tremendous public service to the state it will be if he can help overhaul the property tax system in a way which is more fair and appropriate, especially for, older folks, retired folks, people on limited income who do not want to see rate increases year after year in an inflationary environment.
And we talked about it, but I'm running for Board of Supervisors here in Dallas County, and that is a hot topic. And there's concern, and I've heard it from city councils as well, about what's going to happen with that at the state level.
I'm telling my local electeds that anything's on the table. I'm personally saying I want to cut property taxes, at least residential property taxes, by 50%, whether that necessitates a need to adjust the sales tax. I don't know. I think anything's on the table. I think we've been putting Band-Aids on the system for far too long, and I think we need serious overhaul.
So do you think there's going to be a serious overhaul?
I think if the people of Iowa demand it, I think we saw a lot of school board referendums, bond referendums, that a lot of them got voted down. I know the property taxpayers in my area are very clear that, hey, this is not a good time to be raising taxes. We have a lot of other rising costs. If we can avoid this, I think there's a lot of areas to shrink and reduce government at the local level. I think there's a lot of agencies that are superfluous, a lot of agencies that don't do anything. I'm working through our local government budgets to give them suggestions on how they can, adjust their spending and save serious money by consolidating services or eliminating things that maybe are best left to the private sector. So that's a very important conversation.
Yeah, I've had that conversation.
But it has to be done, and it is like a very fundamental brass tacks government thing. And the property tax system, people have compared it to feudalism. That do you really own your property if you're forced to pay taxes on it every year? And I think that's a serious question too. It might even be the next property rights conversation: is do we want to make a pathway to an allodial title, I think is the term, where people could have their property free and clear and truly have their home, their castle, subject to no taxation to anyone. Again, it's a radical idea, but I know it exists out there somewhere.
Because then you have to figure out, okay, how do we pay for the services that people need and want?
Well, again, and you could subscribe to that. I mean, there are sanitation services right now. The cities contract with private entities like Waste Management to do collection. So theoretically, they could just contract with the residents directly. Yeah, it'd be a lot more work, but at least it could be done. You could create. I mean, the big thing though, we've seen like the ambulance, the EMS levies. Almost all of them always pass. So this is the challenge we're in. A lot of people are saying, hey, we want less taxes. But, when you ask them, what are you willing to do without? They're very hesitant to offer any services that they want to see cut. So there are a lot of, ambulances, they need to run. But even theoretically, you could create some sort of pay-in contract where, okay, if you need an ambulance and weren't subscribed, then you have to pay a higher fee or something. So I don't know, there's a lot of creative ways to accomplish things and make sure that people are getting the services they actually want and not being forced to pay things that they don't want. But again, aside from the essential things, trash and ambulance, I think everyone agrees we need those. But I think there are a lot of other things. So one thing that blows my mind is there's a requirement in code for cities of a certain size to have human rights commissions, which is a total waste of time. And we already have a state civil rights commission that works. So it's a redundant government that how did this ever happen? It's not serving anything. It's a complete waste of time. You could get rid of it tomorrow. No one will notice. I think a lot of counties, how's your service on the public health board? How are you doing?
It's interesting. I mean, I read their 50 some odd page report, and I would kind of agree that there are some services that are overlapping. Mm-hmm. And I hope to make some of those recommendations. It's one of the things that was interesting is they wanted to give every kid school lunch and breakfast. That should be paid for. And my comment was, well, I don't need my neighbor who doesn't even have kids in school to pay for my kids' lunch and breakfast when I can do that. And we already have a system for that. I
mean, in my area, the school districts are doing that. They'll just let the balance
our school districts are too.
So it's like a solution in search of a problem in a way.
Yeah, or okay, we need to research living wage for Dallas County because we don't want people to come here and not realize they can't afford it. So there's this, I know.
Nanny state.
There's this nanny state thing and it's all about compassion.
Do you know what the total budget is of Dallas County Public Health?
No. I've only had or two meetings, but we'll get into that. But I've had discussions with the board about, okay, we need to get back to the mission. What's the mission? And where are we overlapping and doing things that we can just talk to? We can refer services to somebody that's already doing that in the public sector.
Correct.
I think we could narrow the mission. And I believe that if you can do it in one department, you could probably do it across the board if you're open to working together and
or just be honest on what about what people need and what they don't need. And I suspect if it's true in Dallas County, it's probably true for every county in Iowa. And so there's a lot of things we need to dig into, and just, hey, if we get rid of this, will people notice? And if it does cause a problem, we can always fix it on the back end too, or people could voluntarily contribute their money.
Exactly. I mean, would they notice? That's a good question.
Well, did you ever read Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville?
No.
Well, so part of that, I forget exactly what year he comes over. I think it was pre-Civil War, but he was just astonished by how many grassroots local organizations had emerged to fill local needs. And the same way how a lot of the church network were the ones who created the initial hospitals. That's why we have, St. Luke's and Mercy and all these religious hospitals, is because the religious organizations, they took it upon themselves to become the vehicle for medical care and provide that to fill the need.
My church has a food bank.
Yeah.
People go in and they donate food and then they distribute it.
And that's going to be the most efficient way to do it. We have a great organization. They're in Southeast Iowa. They're in Pella and in Fairfield, a few other places, called The Well, which they have, a full spectrum of professional support services for people who are in need. They have a secondhand store. There are a lot of people who are willing to help people out. And then again, they can do it better than the government can. And again, not to quote Malcolm X so much, but even he talks about this too, about just how more effective the private organizations are than the social services. So Malcolm X example, he talked about, their program for recovering drug addicts versus the social services, which had a much lower effective rate.
And we have Alcoholics Anonymous. We have all sorts of Al-Anon. We have all sorts of services we can refer people to.
Yeah. And just make sure those things are going. So it's an incredible conversation that we had to have. And it's, again, just very foundational, because if you don't pay these property taxes, you're going to forfeit your property. And that's, pretty tyrannical when push comes to shove. So there's a freedom issue to it. I think the most important work I do is on the education committee, where we have, again, as we've already alluded to, no shortage of problems there with writing curriculum standards. One good thing, we did get the climate change stuff out of the curriculum standards. So I remember when I was in middle school in 2001, that's when I first saw my first climate change propaganda video. And, as a 13-year-old or whatever, it really shook me up, because it was really well done. And it was predicting by 2009, by 2010, all these disasters will happen. Yeah, these
kids are graduating concerned, and they don't want to have kids. They're like, why would I bring kids into this world where we're destroying our world?
I lived through that. It wasn't, and for a few years after that, when I noticed they kept just pushing back the date of when the disasters were going to happen, that I was like, okay, this doesn't really add up anymore. But the propaganda for an eighth grader, it really does leave a mark. So thankfully, we took that out of the science. Now, again, that doesn't mean that some teacher isn't going to try to inject climate change propaganda, but thankfully now they're not going to be required to do it. So it's a pretty symbolic victory, and it's been the last 20 years this way. So we're finally peeling it back. The Board of Education Examiners, which is who license and regulates the teaching profession, they need a lot of work to just make sure we're adjudicating these complaints efficiently. And I think the expectation is that if there is a complaint against an educator, it needs to be resolved prior to the next school year. We need to get these things solved. And for educators who
and that's the challenge that we're going to face, is there's going to be a period where we've had these educators, these younger educators that have been slightly indoctrinated by our current system, that are in the system teaching.
I wouldn't say slightly. It's their reason. It's their reason for being there. They don't care about education. They care about their political objective.
Okay. So I agree 100%. And then we have them in the school system right now.
Yeah.
And a plethora of those teachers that have been indoctrinated. So then we have to, as you're making laws against these things and trying to change higher education so that's not happening, there's going to be a period where it's going to be difficult.
Well, and I think we're in that period right now, and part of it's because the legislature has taken like half solutions where we did the bare minimum we could, and then these people.
I don't understand that. Why the bare minimum?
Well, I think it's because like enforcement is hard, and it's
we see that because things aren't being enforced.
I don't quite understand it either, but like with the DEI prohibition at college at the universities, it got serious when we put it in the budget. And it took a couple of years to get to that point. So I don't know why we don't do that right away. I think it just takes a tremendous amount of political will that hopefully we're gaining that backbone. But I have constituents tell me that all the time. It's like, why don't you take their money away? It's like, because they scream holy hell, and it's just the most ridiculous thing you'll ever see. And then they throw these accusations. And then again, there are a handful of good actors, people doing the good thing. And if you yank the money, then theoretically you're punishing everyone. It's just very hard. We have basically... the law is a very, very blunt tool, especially if you're crafting a law that applies evenly to every single school district and money that applies evenly to every school district. We just have one gigantic hammer that hammers the whole state. A lot of these school districts, you need to scalpel. And it stinks because on the local level, we're up against it with the Democrats being more organized, having a more cohesive groupthink mentality. Democrats seem to elevate civic engagement as part of their identity. They're not going to church on Sunday. They're protesting at the courthouse is what they're doing in my area.
I'm trying to get my central committee to realize that we have to get into our communities. We have to have neighbor-to-neighbor networks.
Well, one idea, too, that might help would be to move the city and school board elections back on the regular election cycle so everything's on the ballot in the even years in 26 and 28. I mean, I don't know how that would look moving forward, but...
that makes sense.
Well, right now, the local elections, it's great to have an election every year, but again, it's going to be less efficient. And then again, there's just lower turnout. So if we can get all the voters in the same place at once, why not put it all? And then I think we'll see better outcomes, especially because a lot of these races have partisan tinges, and you might as well just make it a partisan race. So that's something the state could do that might improve some of the outcomes we're seeing in these local elections.
Interesting. I like that idea.
It's a bold one. Again, now the pace of change is slow, but I think the more people, especially people like you at the grassroots level, who say, hey, let's try this out. Let's schedule this for a hearing. Let's talk about it. I think we do need to look at more of these structural foundational changes.
Has anybody presented any legislation on that?
I believe so. I think Cindy Golding's talked about it. I think Brooke Bowden's talked about it. I know people have floated it. It's been around there. I don't think it's ever made it out of committee or anything, but it's been discussed as like, hey, this is interesting.
I saw Brooke at Spaghetti with Eddie. She's a dynamo. And Sherilyn Westridge was emceeing the event.
Yeah, both great legislators.
And we talked about this over dinner. And I said I was going to bring it up, and you said that was before my time, but Sherilyn Westridge was a founding member of the Rentals.
Yeah, I know Sherilyn. She's a very enthusiastic, she's a very high charismatic person. I just wasn't around then. I watched VH1 and MTV. I don't remember seeing them.
It was like a spinoff of Weezer, maybe, I think.
I remember Weezer because they had the Blue Album. And I remember Alanis Morissette. I remember Nirvana. I remember Pearl Jam. I wish I remembered more Michael Jackson, but by the time I became conscious, Michael Jackson was like a punchline instead of a pop star.
Pearl Jam was huge when I was in high school. Man, I loved their album. I think it was 10. I mean, we'd drive around and listen to that. But the Rentals, Eddie was saying, and we talked about this a little bit, but Eddie was saying, when we were, because I think they came into the house together, and they were helping each other. And
2020.
He was like, oh, look, Sherilyn, I've got 100 followers on my Facebook page. And she had like 32,000. And they had toured with Madonna.
Yeah.
And
but I think her Facebook is from her TV career, not her music career.
From the Overhauling.
Well, and that's her
that.
Business too, is she does some custom auto stuff, which is
10
very impressive.
seasons, they were refurbishing cars. And I didn't know that either. I Googled it. And I texted her and I said, hey, how did I not know you were a founding member of the Rentals? And she sent me a music video. It was just hilarious.
No, she's an incredibly talented legislator. She's a great fit for the district, and I've been very pleased to call her a friend and a colleague.
What you mentioned that asteroid is that the Atlas 31 Atlas?
I've heard a little bit about that. Yeah.
What is going on with that?
I'm not an expert. You have to contact some astronomists. Maybe the folks at Van Allen Hall at University of Iowa. What I heard, and I don't know if this is true, it's just what I heard from my sources.
Okay.
I heard it was an alien spacecraft.
Yeah.
And it's slowly but surely coming, and this could be the big one, the big deception which unites humanity or something. Because that's the legend of Wernher von Braun. You know Wernher von Braun, right?
No.
So Wernher von Braun was the Nazi rocket scientist that came over in Operation Paperclip and helped found NASA. And apparently his mother was like some German mystic, prophetess type person. So apparently Wernher von Braun on his deathbed, he did a couple of interesting things. One, he wrote a book about colonizing Mars, where the elected president of Mars was called the Elon.
What?
Yeah, which bears a similarity to
That
Elon
is
Musk.
insane.
And then apparently on his deathbed, he also said that there was going to be some sort of staged alien invasion for the purpose of uniting, scaring humanity into submission under one rule or something. Wernher von Braun is a great source of conspiracy theory fodder. And I think that's kind of the big one is, he's apparently, that's what I was told. On his deathbed, he warned about, some sort of fake alien invasion.
Interesting.
So it's just fake. Don't believe it. But it's real that it's fake, but it's just fake.
I know last session you ran a bill on chemtrails.
Well, I think geoengineering is more politically correct term.
Geoengineering, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, we had a bill. It wasn't the greatest legislative product, but a lot's happened in the space. So now we're going to try to replicate what Florida's done. But basically, the state needs to make it clear that we don't have any tolerance for funny business. We're just going to prohibit this. Any sort of aerosol spraying, any sort of stratospheric injections or solar radiation modifications, it's not going to be allowed in our airspace. Hopefully we can create some sort of enforcement mechanism. Like the state of Florida has a website where they're collecting data and submissions from. And Florida is a very interesting state because Florida has a much higher population, a lot more of a military presence. And also they do have intense weather events pretty reoccurring. So Florida has really taken the lead on this. It's Dane Wigington was just on the Tucker Carlson show. He said a lot of really amazing things that need to be corroborated and verified. And, I hope we can go through all that research and maybe replicate it here in the state to figure out what really is going on. I mean, a lot of this is, data sampling and collection and do some environmental analysis because a lot of people dismiss it fully. But it is true that there are, at the very least, what I can definitely say is true is there's a lot of cloud seeding experiments, not necessarily in this state that we know about, but like in North Dakota and Kansas. And it's used as like a drought mitigation, or even they think they can spray things in the lower atmosphere to mitigate hail, which, hail damage is a very serious concern in Van Buren County. So maybe at one point there could be a potential efficacy for this. But right now, if I wanted to, shell out $500,000 to one of these cloud seeding companies, I could do a cloud seeding experiment over my county and there'd be no permit required, no liability insurance. So there is a gap in our legal framework that, hey, this exists. And this is what's so crazy too, because so Democrats mock this and, oh, this is so stupid. These conspiracy theorists are making stuff up. But then at the very same meeting, they say, oh, but these technologies need to be allowed because they can help combat climate change. So again, it's this double think from 1984, where simultaneously this is so stupid, it's not happening. And the next sentence is, but if it did happen, I'd be okay with it because there's, some scientific validity to it. But even the European Union had a statement last year where they said they didn't view it as an effective remedy for climate change. But again, they're acknowledging the potentiality of it. And there's a lot of theories on what actually is occurring, but a lot of it revolves around the idea of suspending some sort of nanoparticles or heavy metals in the upper atmosphere. But no, it's very, very strange. So I don't claim to know all the answers, but I can definitely say we should have a law that doesn't allow it because right now there's nothing.
So is that something you're working on?
Yeah, we're working on it. I met with some constituents last night and they made me promise that we get it done. So, you've got. I'm kind of on the hook now.
All right. Yeah, you gotta act in the best interest of your constituents.
Well, I just have to do whatever they tell me to do
because they elected you.
Hopefully, and that's the idea. Is I've been around for a while. I don't think I'll be in this job forever, but I think I have a little more service to give, and I think I have gained a lot of interesting institutional knowledge and legal knowledge in the 7 years I've been up there.
What do you see for yourself beyond this?
I'm just, well, obviously I'm very excited to become a father,
Right.
and I'm very excited to, just live life and, build a family and build a home that's beautiful, that I can afford to, eat grass-fed beef and, local organic milk and all the wonderful things I like that are becoming more expensive. So we got to be able to provide for myself, and I keep busy in a lot of different ways. But politically, I just want to do a good job for the people in my district. I think there's a lot of relationships still, with school board members, with city councils, with attorneys. I still just want to deepen those relationships and really kind of maybe exercise power more vertically, maybe be a little more influential when it comes to the town councils or the school boards. One thing I want to do actually is Friday, I have a call. So Fairfield's home to one of the most, it's a world-class, state-of-the-art forensic laboratory where they can analyze like residues and contaminants in foods. And so with the pesticide issue, are certain foods contaminated with pesticides that may or may not be having, various effects? Can we put together some hypotheses and do some testing and collect some data and just honestly, report what we find and allow people to draw their own conclusions? So I'm meeting with that local lab. We have a Zoom call scheduled for Friday, and I'm very interested in the pesticide issue and the environmental contamination issue. I think that's something we should be able to find some bipartisan agreement on. And even farmers shouldn't really be too threatened by it, because a lot of the big lawsuits we've seen have been in non-agriculture settings. Even one of the research articles that came out, they were looking at incidents of Parkinson's within a radius of golf courses, because golf courses use a lot of pesticides and things to keep the greens, their lawn care. So this really does affect everyone, and it might affect certain people more than the farmers actually. And so we do need to do some investigation to figure out what's going on. And I'm not saying this is happening, but if potentially there are pesticide exposures in the food that we're eating and it's causing harm, then those companies need to be liable for that. And so that's why we need to make sure that we maintain the legal system we have and ensure that, people have access to courts of law to pursue their complaints and sue the manufacturers of pesticides if they're not properly warned.
So the legislation that you guys did not further, I think it made it through the Senate.
Made it through the Senate on 26 votes.
Okay. And what did that do? Did it?
My understanding, and again, I'm a layman. I just try to pretend to be an attorney sometimes, but basically it said any chemical agent regulated under the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, Rodenticide Act under the EPA. So the EPA regulates all these chemicals, and it says any EPA chemical, as long as it has the proper EPA labeling on it, it cannot be sued for failing to warn the consumer about a particular thing. And so there's been a handful of high-profile legal actions. I think the one that got the ball rolling was a landscaper in California somewhere, and Bobby Kennedy was involved. He had glyphosate directly exposed to his skin on like a daily basis for like 10 years straight. So big surprise, he developed some cancerous lesions on his skin. And nobody had the mind to tell him that, hey, this is a dangerous farm chemical. Make sure you're not, having it directly on your skin, or at least not for long periods of time. And nobody warned him about that. So was there a legal responsibility to provide this man on a warning for the chemical that he was using? And did someone fail to provide that warning? A lot of time the courts look at did someone act negligently? What information did they have? So do you remember that the famous McDonald's coffee lawsuit?
Yeah,
so the woman got a nice payday because she scalded herself on some hot coffee, and people made fun of it. Oh, of course you should know coffee's hot. Well, true, but also the big thing that came out in that case was McDonald's had gotten hundreds of complaints about their coffee being too hot and didn't do anything. And so that's what led to the legal liability for the big payment, that there was a punitive damage that, hey, you could have seen this coming. If someone was acting in good faith, doing all the things that were necessary and proper to protect their customers, they would have turned the coffee pot down a couple degrees. You had the opportunity, you had the knowledge, you didn't do so, therefore the jury is going to award these damages. So it's the same kind of analysis of, what is the reasonable expectation on these companies? What should they be doing? Et cetera. And basically, to me, it resembles the vaccine system where as long as your illness is listed on that vaccine insert, You have to go through the vaccine injury compensation program, which is paid for by taxes, excise tax on each vaccine dose. So it's paid for by taxpayers, and it holds the corporation harmless, and it's administered through a special court, and the money's set in trust.
I didn't realize it was illness listed on the vaccine packaging insert.
So if you can prove causation to an illness that's not warned about on the insert, theoretically the manufacturer is still liable. But
is that why when they have those commercials, they run out all these crazy
you've seen how long the insert is. It's a huge, long, double-sided page with very little writing, and it lists all these conditions, which are very broad umbrella terms that, cover a lot of ground. So to me, the pesticide immunity bill, it does resemble the vaccine immunity given to the childhood vaccine schedule, except they're not paying for damages.
Did it get any traction in the House?
There's a couple people who are interested in the discussion, but they did not have a committee hearing.
Why is there always not always, sometimes such a disconnect between what the Senate supports and what the House will?
I think there's a couple of different explanations for that. I think the Senate has some seniority. A lot of those guys have been around for a lot longer. They have a 4-year election cycle, so they're a little bit more insulated from the public. A lot of their, they have fewer districts, which means they have fewer competitive districts. And I think just in general, certainly on the tort reform issues, you've seen a lot more hesitation in the House. And I think it's just, the members that comprise the chamber, their background. So I don't know if there's anything in particular, but I think a lot of us have noticed the divide. And I'm not sure if it's the culture or the leadership or what exactly it is, because there's still a lot of great senators over there.
There's
and then again, so in 2024, that bill passed with 30 votes. In 2025, it only passed for 26. So that indicates diminishing support.
Right.
More than 10% fewer senators supported it. So it's not, and this is the worst thing about the bill is, so this is a national issue. It's a federal issue. It has to do with the EPA regulations. Why is it Iowa's job to fix this? And as far as I know, so the big numbers we heard was that Bayer Monsanto had set aside, some $10 billion to settle 40,000 legal claims. As far as I know, none of those actions originated in Iowa. There might have been some Iowans who signed on to a class action lawsuit, but there's no big cases. As far as I know, again, please correct me if I'm wrong, anyone listening, but there's no high profile litigations or plaintiffs coming from Iowa. And basically I know we use a lot of it in agriculture, but it's still just Iowa. We're a very, very small percentage of their market share. So it from the corporation standpoint, it's basically a symbolic victory. It doesn't solve the problem for them. So it's just very weird. So you want us as politicians to take a vote to cover these corporations when it isn't really an Iowa problem. The problem's still going to exist at the federal level. And we're not, it's not even an issue. Like you're not solving it. So hopefully that made sense. I think I kind of jumbled over my words at the end, but
I'll listen to it again and it'll make sense.
It's a political liability
I get
and
it.
There's no reward. I mean, you even saw some of the senators cringe when, again, they had some good testimony. Some of the groups have done a good job on this. And it's like, if it was your relative with cancer, because cancer is a serious problem. Yeah. So again, there's no political upside to taking that vote. It's just all political downside on a very emotional, personal issue, and then it does not even solve the problem for. So it's like, to me, I look at it as Bayer Monsanto just gobbling up these politicians and spitting them out just to give them a symbolic victory for their bottom line, so they don't have to pay out another $10 billion in lawsuits. But they do, because California is never going to pass this, New York's never going to pass this. So figure it out with the EPA.
Right. What, just a couple weeks ago, Senator Alon's came out and we talked about transactional gold.
Oh, wow.
And I've had several legislators text me after listening to the podcast saying, man, we're on board. This is great.
Yep.
What a great episode. And he gave me a book called Pirate Money that I read. It was Kevin Freeman. Fantastic. I've got an extra copy. I bought 2 copies from him for whatever cost he paid, but Fantastic book. Kevin Freeman was an economist. What are you looking at, man?
Silver is over $54, baby. So I locked in my trades before market close because I say if this market keeps running up, I want to be exposed to the action, and so I'm good. They're trading silver in Shanghai. $54.14 on the Shanghai exchange there. So
I should have bought it when we were having dinner earlier.
So this morning, because I was looking at these stock prices with the price of silver was going through the roof, and this was in the morning, so it was right around 52, and there was a very clear half-hour delay before the silver mining stocks started reacting to the spot price. So even all these algorithms that have it all figured out, there was still at least a very solid half-hour, 45-minute window to get your money in before it started going straight up. And then it went straight up for the next few hours. So there's plenty of opportunity for retail investors to hop on board. I don't know if you have a brokerage account.
I don't. I've always been a real estate guy, and it's like if I can't touch it and feel it and drive by it and...
Well, so that is the key thing.
Me.
So
that's the thing about transactional gold that appeals to me. It's like, okay, you actually have gold that you could take out, and you can, and it's a legal tender, and you can trade it.
So the challenge is, and again, this goes into like the Bitcoin conversation too. And basically, we have three. I'll divide it into three categories here. So we have the United States dollar, which is the legal tender, government enforced fiat. You have to accept it. And that's a piece of paper. At one time, and you know the history of the dollar.
Right.
I don't know. I didn't see your episode with Kevin Alon's, but...
Yeah, he goes over it, but yeah, you can...
So the piece of paper used to be redeemable for... money used to be gold. And then it became a paper certificate resembling the gold that you could redeem for the gold. And then it became just a piece of paper. So this goes into the whole simulation theory that like all the things are really just a simulation. So, and then the simulation bears no resemblance to what it started out. So the dollar is actually the perfect example of this, that it used to be gold, then it was kind of gold, and now it's nothing at all like gold. It's just a piece of paper, but at least you can still, burn it if you want to create fire, wipe your butt with it, whatever. So you still kind of exist, and it still has a lot of value. The U.S. dollar is still a very, very strong currency. As of the time of this podcast, it's still the world reserve currency of the world, meaning that most global commerce is settled in dollars, which requires that commercial exchange. Okay, we have to move our currency into dollars to buy oil, to settle these contracts. It has to be done in dollars. So that's a huge economic advantage that the U.S. enjoys since the Bretton Woods in World War II. And since then, since 1944-45, the United States government has abused that privilege and has inflated the currency and has run up massive deficits. And so the action we're seeing in precious metals right now, it resembles what happened in 1971. So in 1971, gold was trading at $30 an ounce, and then Nixon took us off the gold standard, and it shot up to $300 an ounce. And that's not the price of gold. That's not the value of gold changing. It's the value of gold priced in dollars. So it's okay. We'll still take your dollars, but it's not gold anymore. So you have to give us more of them so that was a huge shock to the financial system. And that was like the first, big gold bull run where it just skyrocketed in place. And then thankfully, the government evened it out because the dollar was still trustworthy, and basically the dollar became redeemable in oil. So you went off the gold standard and you kind of had this petrodollar system, which is where we've been at now. So I'm a huge gold and silver bug, and so you have dollars, which is paper, and then you have gold and silver, which are incredible metals. And gold is not just decorative, but it's like, for anyone who knows about metallurgy or working with metals or jewelry, like gold is just fantastic. And you can work with it in ways that you can't work with zinc or nickel or aluminum or these other things. Gold has a lot of properties that are unique to itself. And therefore it gives it value for that. And then silver the same way. Silver has a lot of unique properties. It has a lot of unique shine. Silver can disinfect water. They put silver lining in bed sheets in hospitals to help prevent infection disease. So there's a lot of other applications for silver, but it's also used as money, and it has been for a very, very long time. And then now the third bucket, so you have dollars, you have gold and silver or bullion, copper, platinum, whatever, real things. And then you have these Bitcoin and these cryptocurrencies. And a lot of that is purely fictitious. And so sometimes people have called Bitcoin the digital gold, but in reality, from the price action we've seen, Bitcoin is kind of the anti-gold, that people who buy Bitcoin are hedging against gold, and people who buy gold are hedging against Bitcoin. And when Bitcoin goes up, the dollar goes down, or excuse me, when Bitcoin goes up, gold goes down, and vice versa.
Why is that?
So there's a lot of reasons why. One is just there's a lot of theory, monetary theory on what makes a good money. And one of the scientists who explored a lot of this was a guy named Murray Rothbard, and he wrote a book a while back called The Mystery of Banking, where he talks about what are the qualities of a desirable money. And this is a pop quiz for me. I should have wrote these down. But one, you want money that's easily divisible. You know, that, okay, this thing costs, I can come up with the money where I can give you exact change, basically. You know, I can give you the exact amount. It's easy to divide. You want money that does not spoil. So if I have a gold bar today, I can stick that away somewhere and it's not going to deteriorate over time. You know, it's not going to diminish, like physically diminish. It's not going to disintegrate. It's not going to dissolve like, maybe an apple would, or, there's a lot of things that have been used in currency. But like tobacco was a big currency in the founding of America. It stays pretty good for a while, but eventually, like any plant matter, it will degrade and become less potent, and it, just loses its potency. So it's easily divisible. It holds value over time. It's transportable. And this is the big thing about where Bitcoin might have an advantage over gold. And that's why the paper system came. That's why the paper system came to begin with, because it was a lot easier to deposit your gold and your coins in some bullion vault and take the paper certificate, because the paper certificate was
carry around a big bag of gold.
Correct. It was a lot more transportable. And so the advantage that Bitcoin has is it is very easily transportable as long as you have access to a digital network. And that was initially why Bitcoin did spike in value. So the first spike in Bitcoin value, the first Bitcoin bull run, if I remember my history correctly, I think it was 2013, when the island nation of Crete in the Mediterranean did what was called a bail-in, where their government needed money, so they just helped themselves to the bank deposits of their people. And so if you had money and you wanted to get it off the island to keep it safe and not confiscated, you had to buy a Bitcoin. You had to put it in a digital wallet that you could leave the country and then retrieve. So Bitcoin was initially seen as this is going to be a great tool for privacy, to circumvent tyrannical governments, that if you want to preserve assets and get those assets across a national border, Bitcoin could help facilitate that, which then lent to the narrative of, Bitcoin's being used on, the black market or the dark web and all those other various things. And it got kind of associated with nefarious activity, but it also provided that freedom, that privacy. Those narratives have kind of fallen apart now because the distributed ledger is public and you can get an accounting of where every Bitcoin's been. So there's several properties of money. So it's easily divisible, holds money over time, easily transportable. And there's another one, I'll come up with it. But the most important one is that it's going to be recognized as valuable. That if I show you a dollar bill, and thankfully the dollar still enjoys this all over the world. Like if you go to Mexico or, Guyana, or, if you have a US dollar, a lot of them will still take it because it's valuable, and they see it and they'll take it because they recognize it as valuable. And that's true for gold and silver too, that there's just kind of a human instinct that, oh yeah, this is good to have. And you recognize it. And this is why in prisons, cigarettes work as a currency, because people want to smoke. If people didn't want to smoke, cigarettes would not really be a good currency, because who really wants them? But because in a prison situation, in a high percentage of smokers, even if you don't smoke, I can take a cigarette because I know someone else will take it, and it's a good medium of exchange. People will want it.
Right. And all this talk of tobacco and smoking makes me want to have a cigar. So we're going to have to go sit out on the front porch soon.
Hopefully we're almost done. Hopefully I haven't embarrassed myself too much.
No, you know what? I think I understand why Chuck Hurley said you're one of the smartest people he knows.
Well, that's very polite coming from Chuck. He's been around a long time, and I think we're surrounded by a lot of smart people. I was very tickled by that compliment. I think the only thing that I've done that makes me smart is I'm willing to kind of make a fool out of myself. Like I'm willing to throw things out there, and I'm willing to make mistakes. And I think just that willingness to do that over time, maybe breeds a rate of intelligence. Because I've done a lot of things that don't really make sense to people at the time, but 6 months or a year pass by. And it's like, oh wow, Jeff knew what he was talking about. I mean, same thing with the transgender stuff when we were picking those fights back in 2022, and slowly but surely
we were on the front lines when it wasn't cool to be on the front lines.
And then the problems gradually got worse and worse and worse until they were impossible to ignore. And it's okay, let's finally do something. And that was what was most satisfying for me when we got that bill done this year. Is I did all the heavy lifting last year. So now the bill sailed through, everything was done. I just had to kick back and relax. And I didn't even have to open my mouth on the House floor because it was getting done. So that was extremely gratifying that I've viewed myself as kind of a catalyst. I'll initiate the reaction. I'll do something controversial to get people talking. And then slowly but surely, just the wheels turn and things get done.
You've been that force for good.
Well, again, I think the strategy I've employed is, just get up in front of people and speak the truth. That's how I approached the comedy and got some good reactions there. So I applied it to politics and got even more interesting reactions there. Get up in front of people and speak the truth, and then don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and then speak from conviction. And that was the other thing too. I remember this in my first campaign. Like if you're going through all the time, if I'm spending 4 months of my life to be at the legislature, it better be worth my time. Like I better do something that makes it worth showing up. And then obviously the key question of what has God put us on earth to do? What is it that I'm feeling uniquely called to do? What's maybe something that I can point out or attend to that is unique to me that that someone else, and psilocybin is a perfect example of that. There's very, very few other legislators, not just in Iowa, but the whole country that can even approach that topic or would be willing to carry forward.
I saw you talk about that. A video of you talking about that like years ago.
That was one of my first bills. It's actually one of the reasons I wanted to get to office, to have that conversation. And then I just had to wait 7 years. And then thankfully John Wills, who has a lot of respect and credibility, especially as someone who's a no-nonsense military guy who's not looking for a good time. He's looking for legitimate healing. So it's been extremely gratifying that I can kind of shake things up, throw some ideas out there. And I think I'm getting better at kind of stepping back and not getting caught up in things and just, so it's been a little bit of an art. I'm trying to work on my timing. Well, because it's important too, because I've seen this too, activists
I feel like you're talking about comedy when you say I'm trying to work on my timing.
Well, but it's the same. It's the timing of the trades and the market, get your money in the right time. But sometimes you only have to strike the bell once, and then there are other times where you need to be really nagging and persistent. And so it's really kind of interesting trying to read the room, try to figure out, okay, do I need to say anything, or am I okay just shutting up? Will this get resolved without me? I don't need to be butting in other people's business or anything, but if people are bringing a concern to me and it crosses my desk, then I have some sort of authority to do something about it. But now as I grow up, I think the idea is whatever we can objectively consider to be good, to be true, to be decent, to be holy, it needs to be upheld. That these values, this the idea of goodness and an orderly society that is just, it needs to be held up. There's a lot of weight on it right now. There's a lot of weight from ignorance, from naivety, from deception. And so we need as many strong men and women who have broad shoulders like you do, Oliver, who can stand the gap in these local central committees, who can stand the gap at the Capitol and give legislators very, very clear direction. Like, hey, why aren't you getting this DEI bill past the finish line? And making sure that legislators know someone's pushing them. So that's incredibly important that we can uphold that. And I think that's what we need to do for our state. So I feel like I'm growing into the role. I think I am, getting a little more mature and getting some more political experience and success under my belt, but I think there's still a lot of room for growth. And I'm just very thankful for all the Iowans, especially you, who've been here along the way, along this journey. So hopefully we have many more years of working together.
Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate your willingness to stand for the truth. And I've been honored to see you grow. I mean, it's just been amazing to watch you grow as a legislator and a leader. So thank you so much for your service.
You bet.
Yeah. How can people reach you?
So I'm on Facebook, Jeff Shipley, and then Peace Love Iowa is our website. So Facebook message is always good. My phone number is 319-432-3108. That's public. That's out there. So yeah, just give us a call, give us a text, send us an email, and I'd love to connect with whoever wants to.
All right, man. Well, God bless you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And
Amen.
I can't wait till next time, man.
Wonderful.
All
You're the
right.
best, Oliver. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.